Welcome, everybody. We ordered some nice weather for today, and the weather cooperated. Let's clap for the weather. On behalf of the Network for Social Justice, it is great. It is amazing to see all of you this afternoon at this truly collaborative event honoring Juneteenth in Winchester. So a few days after Juneteenth, and we all made it, and the sun's out. I'm Leora from the network, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming you this afternoon to the program, What is Democracy to Frederick Douglass. I want to take just a moment to acknowledge and thank you as individuals, as community representatives, and as leaders in Winchester and surrounding communities for being with us here today. As someone said, for stepping out of your comfort zone and dedicating yourselves to the recent tradition of collectively reading Frederick Douglass's famous address, What to a Slave is the 4th of July. In doing this, we're joining more than 40 cities and towns across the Commonwealth who will take part in the Mass Humanities Reading Frederick Douglass Together program. These readings will take place throughout the month of June, all the way into the weekend of July 4th. According to Brian Boyles, Mass Humanities Executive Director, we need the words of Frederick Douglass now more than ever, especially as the nation confronts rising intolerance and threats to our democracy. Douglass's denunciation of slavery and forceful examination of the Constitution challenges us to think about the stories we tell and the stories we don't tell, the ideas that they teach and don't teach, and the gaps between our actions and our aspirations. When neighbors, organizations, and communities come together to do this, like we are doing today, they choose to take responsibility for the past, and they're also imagining a shared path forward for themselves, their children, and their communities. In this work, we are delighted to have Nathan Richardson, performer, poet, and published author, with us today. Nathan is actually returning to Winchester, this time in person, having been with us virtually last year at our Black History Month program, Frederick Douglass in Winchester, which was co-sponsored by the Winchester Historical Society, among others. A huge thank you once again to the Winchester Historical Society, to the Winchester Cultural District, to the Winchester Public Library for helping us make this program a reality today. I also want, before I hand it off to Harrison, to thank our community sponsors today who have come, stepped out of their comfort zone, and are doing this with us. The Winchester Chamber of Commerce, the Winchester Music School, Right Lock Farm, the Mystic Valley NAACP, the Winchester Unitarian Society, the Winchester Cultural Council, WinCam, the Winchester Historical Society, the Parish of the Epiphany, Crawford Memorial Church, and Temple Shir Tikva. You are really at the core of this program, and I want to thank you for doing this. I now want to turn the program over to Harrison Zyberg, our AmeriCorps Fellow this year at the Network for Social Justice, who has really been the prime mover in getting this program today together. Thank you, Harrison. You're going to take it away.
Thank you. Speaking loudly is not my normal state, so I'll try to change that for this event. But as Leora said, my name is Harrison Zyberg. I am the SCI AmeriCorps member who has been serving with the network this past year. First, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this event. To begin, we're going to have a community reading of the speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. Following the community reading, we'll have a presentation and later a Q&A period with Nathan Richardson, who will be portraying Frederick Douglass. And before we begin, I just want to again extend my gratitude to everyone who has agreed to be a reader and to all of our many community sponsors. I will be the first reader representing the Network for Social Justice, and I just want to remind all of the readers to please call up the next group once you're done with your section. So we will begin. What to the Slave is the 4th of July. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance and to the signs and to the wonders associated with that act and that day. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but mere speck in the life of a nation. There is consolation in the thought that America is young. I would like to call up now the Winchester Historical Society.
Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. But your fathers, feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. Their conduct was wholly unexceptional. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn. Yet they persevered. They were not the men to look back. I'd like to introduce the Winchester Cultural Council.
On the 2nd of July, 1776, the Old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history. Followed by Family Action Network. Thank you.
Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? I'd like to call up the Winchester Community Music School.
But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessing in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? Call up Right Lock Farm.
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions, whose chains heavy and grievous yesterday are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. Call up the Winchester Chamber of Commerce.
My subject, then fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. I call up the Mystic Valley NAACP.
What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to bum their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters. Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply. I call up Winchester Unitarian Society.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than any other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgiving, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. I call up Winchester Coalition for a Safer Community.
Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope. I invite Temple Shaktiba.
While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around in the same old path of its fathers without interference. I call up Crawford Memorial.
God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come all feuds to end and change into a faithful friend each foe. God speed the hour, the glorious hour, when none on earth shall exercise a lordly power, nor in a tyrant's presence cower, but all to manhood's stature tower by equal birth. That hour will come, to each, to all, and from his prison house the thrall go forth. Parish of the Epiphany.
Until that year, day, hour arrive, with head and heart and hand I'll strive to break the rod and rend the gyve, the spoiler of his prey deprive. So witness heaven, and never from my chosen post, whatever the peril or the cost, be driven. I'd now like to invite up Harrison.
Thank you. So that ends our community reading portion of the event. I want to thank all of our readers and all of the organizations that they represent. Next, we are going to be moving on to our Frederick Douglass presentation as portrayed by Nathan Richardson. Nathan M. Richardson is a published author, performance poet, and Frederick Douglass historian. His poetry collections include Likeness of Being, 21 Imaginary T-shirts, and the last 7 poems of an unarmed citizens. Books featuring Nathan's success story include You Can Do That, Amazing People with Amazing Jobs by David Messick, and You Don't Want Success, Demolishing Fears and Excuses by Miko Marsh. He is now in the 9th year of the Frederick Douglass Speaking Tour, a living history performance in which he captures completely the physical and spiritual essence of the former slave, writer, orator, and abolitionist Frederick Douglass. This living history series has produced film credits with the National Park Service and the Alabama Public Television. Nathan's rendition of Frederick Douglass Honors the Unknown Loyal Dead was nominated for Best Short Film at the 2022 I Will Tell International Film Festival. You can find more out about Nathan Richardson and his work at www.scpublishing.com. Thank you.
Good evening, citizens of Winchester. When I get to the modern era, I have to concentrate on where I might be landing. I was sitting beside the gentleman there with the Rochester hat on, and I was just reminiscing about my time in Rochester. I am indeed very happy to be here today. Thank you. My first sentiment is one of gratitude, and I thank you for the warmth and earnestness of your welcome. Hearing you all read my words certainly makes me happy with unusual diffidence to hear my words being spoken in what is now the year of our Lord 2023. And so I really feel very happy to be here with you all, and to Harrison, who introduced me. You did a fine job, young man. You reminded me of Mr. Collins, who, you see, I came here by way of Talbot County in Maryland. And I assure you that getting from Maryland to this place, to this podium, is a considerable distance, and the difficulty in getting from the former to the latter is by no means slight. I left Baltimore and ran away, and then came to New York, and then to New Bedford, Massachusetts, where I found my freedom and met Mr. Garrison. And then Mr. Garrison heard me speaking in a small church and invited me to Nantucket to speak, and then hired me as an agent to speak. And the first thing he said, we're going to go on a 100 conventions tour throughout Massachusetts. And so I started speaking. That was the beginning of my career as an orator. And I remember Harrison, Mr. Collins, who was assigned to introduce me at most of these meetings. He would say to the audience, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have before you Frederick Douglass. He is the graduate from the Peculiar Institution of Slavery with his diploma written on his back." And so I'm sure all of you, many of you have degrees and letters, and I trust that they would not be written on your back. And so I'm here today to talk to you on this peculiar topic of American democracy. I know what it meant to me in my time, my change in views on the Constitution and American democracy. And when I finish my talk here, I hope that you all might have some questions, or we might have a discussion on, and you can tell me what your democracy looks like today. I'm certainly interested in knowing. But before I get into that, I did want to, you all sounded very, very nice. You're great orators. I have sometimes seen myself referred to as an orator, but for the life of me, I cannot tell why that reputation is accorded me. I have cited some in years past in the telling of a simple story of human bondage, such as 1,000 other colored Maryland boys could have told with equal skill and effect. But you have called me to speak, and I have obeyed your call. When I gave this speech in Rochester in 1852, it was of the invitation of the Rochester Women's Anti-Slavery Association. They had been formerly called the Rochester Women's Anti-Slavery Sewing Society, and the ladies decided to put up the needle and do some other things in the community, and so they changed their name to the Rochester Women's Anti-Slavery Society, and they invited me to Corinthian Hall, which was in Reynolds Theater, right there on Main Street in Rochester. I don't know if you have been there, sir? But it was a grand building, and it was right down the street from my office. You understand, my office. I think Corinthian Hall was at 125 Main Street, and my newspaper was at 16 Main Street, East Main Street. And when the women called me, I said, well, I will not come. I will not speak. What to the American slave is the 4th of July? Why would you ask me to speak? And then many of them came and visited me. This is Mr. Douglas. Who else would be the authoritarian to speak on such a topic as you, the abolitionist? And so I agreed to, I kept them waiting until July the 5th. But nevertheless, the hall was filled, and the women were there, along with some men, and they were all there to listen. And I will just give you a brief rendition of what I said that day. Thank you all for helping me recall the words of my speech. Some of them I had forgotten, but I have a pretty good memory for 205 years old. But basically what I said to the ladies that day, I'm pausing because I do see some children in the back there. I'm always excited to see young people at events like this. Ladies and gentlemen, when I first gave this speech, the country was but 76 years old, and I was but 35 years old. The country was in its infancy, and I was a young man. Now I am not young. And the frost of winter is visibly on my head. Time has, I am glad to see, touched many of you gently. Fellow citizens, oppression can drive a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became agitators under their oppression. And so it was ultimately on this second day of July of 1776 that they decided to separate themselves from Great Britain. And they did this in the form of a resolution. And for the benefit of your memory and to help my story, I will read the resolution. And I quote, resolved that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved of all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the British Crown is and ought to be dissolved. Fellow citizens, your fathers succeeded with the resolution. They succeeded, and you reap the benefits of their success. The freedom gained is yours. This 4th of July is yours. I have no wanting of respect for the founding fathers of this country. They were brave men and they were peaceful men, but they chose abolition rather than peaceful submission to bondage. But fellow citizens, your fathers have lived and they have died and they have done their work and they've done much of it well. You must live and you must die, and you must do your own work. You have no right to wear out and waste your father's reputation and enjoy a child's share of your father's labor unless you yourself produce some fruits of labor for your children and grandchildren. And so you have no right to waste your father's reputation for your own idleness. The great Sidney Smith said, men seldom eulogize the fame and virtues of their forefathers except to exclude some folly or wickedness of their own. Which brings me to the point. Fellow citizens, why have I been called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar, to confess the benefits, to express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting in your independence to us? I am not included in the pale of your glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings by which you today rejoice are not shared in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthem is inhumane mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day which reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciations of tyrants brass-fronted impotence, your shouts of liberty and equality hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people at these United States at this very hour. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the earthquake, the whirlwind. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. And the crimes against God and man and all of us here today must be proclaimed and denounced this day, the 5th of July, 1852. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, as I was saying, I gave this speech in 1852, and my ideas on the Constitution were really forming based on the fact that I was able to teach myself how to read and write. I assure you that I had met Mr. Garrison in New Bedford, and he had a different idea of the Constitution. You understand that they were nonconformists, they were non-voters. They felt that we could change the country by mere moral suasion, which was a different idea from John Brown, who said we would have to have a war. But I was following the ideas of the Garrisonian movement, and I was speaking on those things. I was going by what Mr. Garrison and his great speeches were saying about the Constitution. That's a very loud carriage. And so my ideas of this Constitution were somewhat in line with the Garrisonians. But thank God I was able to teach myself how to read and write. Children, are you listening? You understand that reading, once you can read, you will be forever free. Once you educate yourselves, you free your mind, and then your body has to follow. You cannot enslave a freed mind. Once your mind is free, your body has to follow. And so maybe I might show these children how I was able to get from the former to the latter. How I was able to read the Constitution for myself and then make up my own intelligent mind about what democracy means. Could I get the young men in the back there? Could you come up, sir, and read with me? Yes, come. Yes, come, sir. If he can't come, then maybe a young lady might be. Come. Give them a round of applause. Give them some encouragement to come and read with Frederick Douglass. Yes. Yes, sir. And what's your name, young man?
Elias.
Elias?
Yes.
Yes. And come over here. This magic stick there is some kind of trouble. And you, young lady, what is your name?
Sarah.
Sarah? Well, very nice to meet you, Sarah. Now, just for the audience here and to let everyone know, I assure you I was not able to read and write when I left Talbot County, when I escaped. I did not know a letter. But I was fortunate enough to be living with my master's cousins, Hugh and Sophia All, and Mrs. All would teach me a few ABCs. And because of that, I was able to teach myself how to read and write. It was not long after she was teaching me how to read that I heard her husband go to her and say, "Sarah, I understand you're teaching that boy how to read." She said, "Yes, husband, that shouldn't be a problem." He said, "Yes, it is. Do not teach that boy how to read. You know it's against the rules. It'll make him good for nothing. All he'll be thinking about is words and not doing his chores." Can you imagine, sir, if someone said you could not read at all?
That would be ridiculous, because reading is the most important skill I've learned in my life.
Yes, obviously your parents understand that it is easier to build strong children than repair broken men. That's why they send you all to school. Yes. And so what I wanted to do here is to, this is the school book. You all were carrying, the young boys were carrying this book along the way. Of course, I would walk young Master Thomas to school, and I certainly did not go in with him. He went into school, and it wasn't until the bell rang that I went back and walked him back. But I would see them carrying this book. It's called The Columbian Orator. It's full of speeches and poems and such. And so because I didn't have any money, I went out on the streets and got myself a stump and some shoe polish, and I started shining shoes to raise some money. 75 cents I purchased this book, sir. I would say to the men walking by, 5 cents to shine your shoes, sir. 1 cent to dust you off. And with 75 cents, I purchased this book. Now, what I want you all to do is read the first poem that I learned how to recite out loud. You'll read in unison, and we'll do this in a call and response format. You hold the book. Here is the poem here. You see? Now, I'm going to say the line and then you just repeat after me. The language is somewhat difficult. The King's English has changed somewhat in this modern era. But are you ready to read, children? Are you ready to listen? Well, let us read. You'd scarce expect one of my age
You'd scarce expect one of my age
to speak in public on the stage.
to speak in public on the stage.
And if I chance to fall below
And if I chance to fall below
Demosthenes or Cicero,
Demosthenes or Cicero,
don't view me with a critic's eye,
don't view me with the critic's eye,
but pass my imperfections by.
but pass my imperfections by.
Large streams from little fountains flow.
Large streams from little fountains flow.
Tall oaks from little acorns grow.
Tall oaks from little acorns grow.
And though I now am small and young,
And though I now am small and young,
of judgment weak and feeble tongue,
of judgment weak and feeble tongue,
yet all great learned men and women like me.
yet all great learned men and women like me.
Sir, you do support the women, do you not? You stop reading on that penultimate line there. Can we repeat that? Yet all great learned men and women like me
Yet all great learned men and women like me
once learned to read their ABC.
once learned to read their ABC.
Yes, let's give them a round of applause. Now, young lady, you might have seen there that on that penultimate line, you did not see the word woman. Do you not see it there?
No.
Yes. And so why do you think I added the woman to the phrase?
I don't know.
To not be sexist.
To not be sexist, yes, yes. I mean, we have a promiscuous audience here. So it looks like they're willing to listen to the woman's voice. Yes, I was a woman suffrage man. I stood beside the women, and so anytime I'm reading, I want to include the woman in the conversation. And so, yes, that would be the reason. Now, for helping me, I certainly want to give you all something that might help you in your future endeavors. I don't know what design you have on the future, but a pocket copy of the Constitution might serve you well. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, wonderful readers. And so, in reading the Constitution, I come to the understanding that, in fact, what Mr. Garrison was telling me was not true at all, that this Constitution, in fact, is not a dead letter. It is a living idea. And that if it is a living idea, then you can add paragraphs to the letter. Yes, and so this is what I was saying even then in 1852 after I started to analyze the Constitution, that there's this idea that this Constitution sets out the principles of our democracy and that we have to live up to them. And we cannot be claiming that our forefathers were so genius when we ourselves had not contributed to this letter. And so once we had the Civil War and finally settled this issue of slavery, then we went right to work to add letters, add paragraphs to the letter. That we would add the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment to the Constitution to give us citizenship, to give us equal protection under the law, and hopefully we were trying for the franchise, the vote for men, for black men, and for women, all women. And of course, at that time, the rest of the country would not come along, ladies. They said the women would have to stand aside on their turn to vote. Do you have the franchise now? Yes. Wonderful. And what letter did they add, what paragraph did they add to the Constitution for that? The 19th Amendment. So there are 19 amendments now. Or more? Yes. And so you are laying the fruits of labor for your children. That is a wonderful thing. That's what we should be doing, and we should be setting our children up to not just live off of your wealth, You should be trying to spend it. Yes. And so this idea of American democracy changed for me in that I realized that the Constitution is actually a remedy to our problems if we will stay civically engaged in our democracy. That we might understand that, in my humble opinion, that there are two constitutions. One written by our founding fathers, guaranteeing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, certain inalienable rights that all men are created equal, and that this document would serve us well if we use it properly. If we understand that the Constitution is in us and the way we live the Constitution is actually a Constitution into itself. It is in the body politic of all of us. And so the Constitution, as written by our founding fathers, of course, you understand, it has 3 branches of government. And the body politic, it has 4. Those of you who are sitting on the ground, you might, but those of you sitting in a chair, you might understand this 4-pronged body politic. That the Constitution within all of us has 4 branches, 4 equal branches of the ballot box, the jury box, the soap box, and the cartridge box. Now, we've been sitting here, and those of you sitting in a chair, you're sitting on a very stable democracy. But woe betide you if one of those branches gets longer than the other, then you might find yourself sitting on a very rocky democracy. I hope that is not the case in this modern era. And so that's my understanding of what American democracy is. And it finally came to the understanding, of course, after the Civil War and the emancipation. We have just celebrated Juneteenth. I think you all call it Juneteenth now. We called it Jubilee or Freedom Day. And so the speeches that I gave in 1865 are echoes of what I did in 1852 with the What to the Slave is the 4th of July. I gave a speech many times throughout, and I started this speech actually here in Massachusetts. They called me to speak, and they said, Mr. Douglas, now that you have your emancipation, what do you do now? I said, well, we want the franchise. Let me tell you what the black man wants. And I started here in Boston with that speech, what the black man wants. And I told the society, I might give you a few words of it, and then we'll start our question and answer. I came here as I have come always to these meetings as a listener and not as a speaker. And one of the reasons why I have not attended more frequently the meetings of this society is because of the disposition of some of my friends to call me out upon the platform even when they knew there was a difference of opinion as to the duty of those who rightfully belong to this platform and myself. I do not know if there is any difference of opinion as to the duty of an abolitionist at this present moment. But General Banks enacted a labor policy in Louisiana that was discriminatory to blacks, saying he was trying to better help prepare them for freedom. Wendell Phillips countered by saying if there was anything patent in the whole history of our 30-year struggle, it was that the black man is no more needing a preparation for liberty than the white man. What is freedom? It is the right to choose one's own employment. And if it means anything, when any individual or any groups of individuals undertakes it to tell another man when he shall work, where he shall work, and for what he shall work, they are reducing him to slavery. He is a slave. If he is not a slave of any individual master, he is a slave of society and holds his liberty as a privilege, not as a right. Now is the time. Now is the time. But I fear when all the tall heads of this rebellion have been swept down, and they will be swept down, when all the Davises and all the Toombses and all the Stevenses leading this rebellion have been blotted out, there will still be a rank undergrowth of treason interfering with the quiet operation of the federal government. So where are you now? Now is the time. I want the franchise for the black man. Some say the Negro is ignorant. But if he knows enough to be hung, he knows enough to vote. If he knows enough to pay taxes, he knows enough to vote. If he knows enough to shoulder a musket and fight for the flag, he knows enough to vote. If he knows enough when sober, as the Irishman knows when he is drunk, he knows enough to vote. Many have asked the question of the abolitionists, what shall we do with the Negro? I say do nothing with us. Your doing has already played mischief with us. Just leave us alone. If you see us going to school, let us alone. If you see us going to the dinner table at a hotel, let us alone. If you see us going to the ballot box, just let us alone. If you see us going to the workshop, just let us alone. Your interference is doing us a serious injury. And so, I would say to those of you in the audience, and this is what I said after emancipation, that so much, my white fellow citizens, you have done and well done. There is, however, one other thing needed to make your work good and complete. One demands the restoration of all rights. I stand here, therefore, to advocate the doctrine and practice of absolute political and civil equality. Now that the monster of slavery is dead, let the shadow and the substance go down together and let them sleep forever in a common grave. And to my colored friends, with the adoption of the new Constitution, your condition is radically changed. I believe that you should go back to the country and continue to farm the land for a wage. I believe that $100 in the country is better than $400 in the city. You should go there and save your funds and endeavor to buy land and build homes and churches and schools. All we need is an effort, a firm and tireless effort, and we can make this great state of Massachusetts and the rest of the country a land of opportunity for all men and women, regardless of race. Right is of no sex. Truth is of no color. God is the Father of us all, and we are all brethren. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, I'm not sure how much time we have. I see some of you are shading from the sun, but if you might have a question or two, I would be happy to answer. Anyone that might have a question, what is your democracy like today? Do you have any questions about it? You all out there, you are civically engaged with the organizations that you have. What are you doing for democracy? No question? Yes, sir.
Some folks around here know that I'm a bit of an advocate. And we still struggle that women would be in the U.S. Constitution fully equal.
Yes.
As you are, sir.
Yes, sir.
And also that children would be fully protected by the Constitution, which they are not.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts from your vantage point?
Well, if they're not fully enfranchised in American democracy at this point, it might be because of some. Well, this is what was true of our time. When I stood beside the women of the suffrage movement, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Mrs. Mott, they all had come to the idea that we do not have rights at all. We have so much privilege that we think we have rights. That's what happens in a capitalistic society where you have so much privilege. You have a fine car, you have a fine house, a fine carriage, whatever you're driving at this point. And you have so much privilege, you think you have rights. But those things, those amenities can be taken away from you at any moment. Rights are something that if it's guaranteed by the Constitution, it cannot be taken from you. And so when you realize that, if you realize that, like the Grimke sisters, who were in South Carolina and left their vast riches to their father and just walked away from everything they owned and joined the suffrage movement, because they finally realized that we do not have rights at all. And so that would be the thing to show to your young women, to actually go and have them read a copy of the Declaration of Sentiments written by the women. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but you all might want to join me in a few weeks in Seneca Falls. We'll be celebrating Convention Days, where they drafted the Declaration of Sentiments in July of 1848. And so reading these documents is going to refresh your memory. It's apropos that you asked that question, because we have literally read the Constitution. You read the Constitution just like you read my speech, and then you come to an understanding about it. You read the Independence and you have an understanding about it. If we're not reading this in school, if our teachers are not teaching our children how to think, then that might be not why they don't have the franchise. Yes, sir. Is there another question? Yes, ma'am. American democracy? Yes. Well, I would just say what I just said to him. This book that I had the children read from, this was the school book of the time. There was a boys' version and there was a girls' version. And I assure you, there were arguments in this book for and against slavery. And they were teaching this in the schools. And so they allowed the children to make up their own intelligent mind. They would study rhetoric and debate about the subject and the topic. And so this gives the people an opportunity to make up their own intelligent minds about things. And that we tell both sides of history. That we don't, as they did after the Civil War, start leaving out the suffering of whole millions of fellow men and women in bondage. I call them the apostles of forgetfulness. Yes. So if I went to a young man back here in the back or something and I said, young lady, I've lost a coin. I've lost a nickel and I want you to help me find it. Now, look for a buffalo. Well, she'd only have 50% of chance of finding that coin, because a nickel has two sides. And if you only give a person one side of the coin, then they only have half a chance of finding their way to the future. Yes. 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 Maybe one more question. Anyone? Yes, yes. The lady here had a question, and then I'll come right to you. Yes, ma'am. Certainly, you might, if you read the woman's suffrage speech that I gave in July of 1848, I actually quote Theodore Parker. Three grades of human greatness. First is greatness of executive and administrative ability. Thirdly, greatness in the ability to organize. And thirdly, the ability to discover truth. These are the things that will help the women get to where they want to go. I was quoting Theodore Parker, but this question of what to do with the black man, I mentioned it earlier. When they said, will I go back to Africa? I said, well, I will not go back to Africa. I was born here, and so I will not go back to Africa. There might be some who want to go back, and they're welcome to go back. I am posed with that question in the modern era when I come back, and they said, Mr. Douglas, maybe we should just go back to Africa. I said, well, you do understand that Africa is not a country, it's a continent. And so the ultimate question would be, if you're going back to Africa, what country will you go to and what constitution will you serve before you buy your ticket? Yes, and so, ma'am, on my journey out of bondage, I had already tried to escape once, and I was caught. There was a traitor amongst the four of us, and they caught us and threw us in jail. I was in jail for 3 months, and very fortunate that my master, Captain Anthony, bonded me out rather than sell me to Mississippi or Alabama. And then when they sent me back to Baltimore, now I am still a slave, but I am able on the weekends to go to what we had, the camp meetings. We would sit up in an area like this and sing songs and food and socialize and whatnot, and free and enslaved people. And I met Anna Mary, my future wife, Anna Mary. Now, she was the first of 8 children to be born free. And as we sat and started talking and holding hands, she said, it's not right for you to be a slave for life. And so we made a plan that I would escape, that she would sew me a sailor suit, and that I would catch a train out of Baltimore and then a ship and then make my way to New York. And once we arrived in New York, of course, I was told to meet Mr. Ruggles of the Underground Railroad. And so when I went to Mr. Ruggles, he took some information from me. He said, "What are your trades, sir?" I said, "Well, I'm a ship's caulker. I worked in the shipyards in Baltimore." And he said, "Well, the best place for you to go is New Bedford. They're looking for green hands. It's a whaling town." And so he made arrangements for me and my now wife, Anna Murray, to go to New Bedford. And the first thing that the startling thing I realized about you people is that my idea of wealth in Talbot County in a slave society is that wealth was associated with owning slaves. That if you owned slaves, you were relatively wealthy. You had a fine house, carriages, and so forth. And any white man that did not own slaves, he was relatively impoverished. And so when I get here to Massachusetts, there are no slaves anywhere, but everybody is wealthy. Everybody has fine houses and carriages and such. And I'm saying, where does the money come from? And then I found out that it is not true. You do not need slaves to establish wealth. That you can actually form an industry and everybody can work in unison, no one whipping another man to make him work. And you can just sing songs of joy that you are satisfied with your labor. And so that's one of the first things that I learned by coming to Massachusetts. Yes. Yes. Yes, ma'am, you have a... Oh, yes, you did, ma'am. Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say that Mrs. Mott was one of the first to understand that. In Philadelphia, with her anti-slavery society, they established that any merchandise bought or sold could not be at the hands of slaves. And so that was a wonderful thing to do to support those of us who were in bondage. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, yes. Well, I think that is my time, but I certainly appreciate the invitation of the Network for Social Justice and the Winchester Historical Society and all the others who contributed to this cause. I thank you so much. I am yours truly, Frederick Douglass. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you for our community sponsors and our readers, to WinCam for filming this, and especially thank you to Nathan Richardson. This event could not have happened without any of you. The network wants to wish you, well, first again, really thank you for coming out and making this event a success. We want to wish you a good night, and we hope to see you all next year at our next Juneteenth celebration. Thank you.
Yes, yes.